We're changing attention to another matter, which is also equally important, security, especially in the northeast of the country. Thankfully, all but one, sadly, I mean, not but one, 104 Dapchi girls have been released, but one is still being held. And we know that in the wake of that release, after the girls did meet President Buhari, he did say that he was also considering, he was open to the option of amnesty to Boko Haram militants. That has generated some discussion. And we hope to delve into that with Group Captain Sadiq Shehu. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much, Mokwe.
Oh, beg your pardon. Let me do this proper introduction. He's retired Group Captain Sadiq Shehu and is a security consultant and adjunct professor at the George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies in Germany. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, if I may come in, I mean, let's quickly talk about this scenario. I know that we've seen what happened in Dapchi, first and foremost. Can I quickly get your assessment of, you know, how that situation transpired? Were you happy with all that you saw and the return of how the girls were eventually returned?
Okay, going backwards, it could have been avoided, given that we had lesson from Chibok. After it happened, the reaction was far better than what we used to see in terms of communication, even though some hitches still remain, because it took us some days to know actually how many number of girls were in the school, which is even comforting if you don't have the girls, and you know how many have been rescued. Such details, it took a time to come, but they eventually came faster than maybe we could say Dapchi. The remarkable success in returning them eventually, even though we don't have details of what happened behind the scene, but again, it's another milestone. So we could say that a few lessons were taken from Dapchi. Most was not taken in terms of prevention, in terms of crisis management, what it happens, but we have a good success in returning them. What remains now is to ensure that the lessons of both Chibok and Dapchi are taken into concrete terms. I'm happy to see the re-emergence of the Safe School project, which is, I think, a comprehensive program that, if followed, will really not only attacks on Boko Harams. I always say that in any schools, you have children that go to school now. How many schools have a simple fire emergency procedure in case there is fire? So what I am looking for in that Safe School project is an all-hazard approach. It could be abduction, it could be fire, it could be gas leakage. We've had all that in Nigeria. Do our schools, do our public places have, you know, the mechanism to react? I may differ on the aspect that some people say military should have been there. Certainly we don't have enough military men, or enough soldiers, or even enough civil defense to guard all schools. But Safe School projects, it involves also teaching the students and even their teachers. They shouldn't be helpless. There should be a plan on what to do. What to do may prevent, and even if it doesn't prevent, it shows that everybody knows what to do. There's a coordinated action, so the confusion we see will be reduced.
So in the wake of that, thankfully, a number of the girls have been released. All but one have been released. Now, the federal government said they were able to successfully do that through negotiations, and they insist that no ransom was paid. But the question remains, what sort of negotiations do you think that we possibly could have been doing with Boko Haram?
Well, when you are talking of counter-insurgency measures, a country faced with counter-insurgency is supposed to use all tools of national power. Military, which is what comes to mind, law enforcement, legal, financial, and even the negotiation. Current insurgencies, not only in Nigeria, have shown us that negotiation can never be ruled out. You normally read that we don't negotiate with terrorists, no concession for terrorists, but the reality on the ground is that almost all countries, depending on circumstances, they do negotiate with terrorists. But it's the manner of negotiation. It's what will a country accept, what will it not accept. If you have terrorists that have hostages, like the young girls, who are minors first, who are from an area that is chronologically known for girl child deprivation, honest, the government is boxed in the corner. I have read comments of saying that government should not negotiate. Call it America, even Israel, Many countries, they do negotiate with terrorists. But of course, what happens between these negotiations, most countries like to keep them secret. Yeah.
Crew Captain, I just want to ask you, when we think of amnesty in this country, of course, the minds of many Nigerians will go back to 2009, when our late former President Umaru Yar'Adua brought in the amnesty program in the Niger Delta. We've obviously seen the effects of that in terms of the recovery of oil output and relative peace in the region, equating that now to this kind of conversation that's coming up about the president's potential willingness to allow for the same for Boko Haram militants. Some people say, look, the militants in the Niger Delta weren't spilling the blood of children, they weren't kidnapping and raping children, that this was strictly a socio-economic issue that they had to address. Can you equate the two, and do you think that it's fair that the president would implement this program the way that our late president once did?
Thank you very much. As a counterterrorism practitioner myself, honestly, what concerns me is the security implication of any program. Of course, I have seen comments from, like normally in Nigeria, everything is politicized. I have seen Khan versus IGN. I have seen Arewa Consultative Forum versus Afenifere, saying that we shouldn't look at amnesty as a tit for tat. Each issue should be taken in its individual merit. Let's look at what did the International Criminal Court said. The International Criminal Court, they have reviewed both the insurgency in the Niger Delta, the militancy in the Niger Delta, and what is happening in the Northeast. Their conclusion is that in the Niger Delta, it is not really an armed conflict in the legal sense of the word. That is an internal armed conflict, and there were no grave violations to international law, like a war crime, like crime against humanity perpetrated. So for that reason, you cannot equate